I'm Allie Nash. I am the Director of Law School Admission Counseling over at Stratus Admissions. Prior to Stratus, my background in admissions was, I should say, as the Dean and Director of Admissions and Financial Aid at the University of Arizona College of Law for several years. Prior to that, I practiced law in a large firm. But I'm very happy to be back in admissions and looking forward to this webinar tonight.
Yeah, great. Same. Thanks so much for joining. I'm excited to be with you here as well. We had a conversation on my podcast and YouTube channel a little while ago, and I'll link it for folks afterwards. But it was great to connect with you back then, and I'm excited to feature your advice once again.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Of course, I'm glad to be co-hosting this with you. For those who don't know me, my name is Steve Schwartz. I run the LSAT blog. I also host the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel and podcast. I've been coaching the LSAT for nearly 15 years now. I can't believe it's been quite that long. I started off scoring around a 152 on my initial diagnostic. I ended up getting a 175 on test day. And rather than going to law school, I decided to devote my career to the LSAT because I just got weirdly obsessed with it and fascinated by it. So I do a bit of one-on-one coaching still, but I primarily focus on offering free and low-cost resources through my website, my YouTube channel, my podcast, as well as my live online classes and online on-demand courses. So, Ali, I was thinking for tonight that we could do a bit of discussion on it, LSAT, a bit on admissions, then open it up to a general Q&A. How's that sound?
That sounds terrific.
Okay, great. So I'll just dive in, sharing a little bit about the changes that have been happening this year with the digital LSAT, some LSAT policy changes. And I also got a few questions submitted from students in my courses around the digital LSAT. So I'll just knock those out as well, since a lot of folks have questions around those things as well, particularly the digital LSAT. So I'm guessing most of you in the class right now are aware that LSAT has gone digital. The July LSAT was the transitional exam, half of students getting the paper version, half getting the digital. But starting this fall, everyone in North America is getting the digital LSAT. Specifically, it will be on a tablet, not a computer. It'll be on a Microsoft Surface Go 10-inch tablet. And the question then arises, do you need a tablet to practice? Do you need this particular tablet? I don't think you need this particular tablet. Any old tablet will do. You could use a Samsung. You can use an iPad. I would recommend using a 10-inch tablet if possible, but it's not a requirement. You could get an Amazon Fire HD 10 tablet for about $150 and always return it after the LSAT if you decide that it's not for you. I do think it's worth getting some sort of tablet, though, just to get a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more familiar with the digital format. Although the content of the exam is not changing, of course, the way in which it's delivered is changing. And so it's worth getting familiar with this. Of course, if you are overseas, you don't need to worry about this. If you're in Asia or Latin America or Africa or Europe, you're still getting the paper version. But if you are taking it in North America, which I'm guessing most folks here are, you do want to practice like it'll be game day. LSAC has released a few exams in the digital format. They are on LSAC's website at familiar.lsac.org. I highly recommend checking out that site and saving those few practice exams to do in the digital format. If you don't have a tablet, maybe borrow one, get one from a friend, use your parents, or like I said, buy one and return it later. It's worth getting familiar with it because there are some annotation features you do want to be aware of. For example, you can highlight, you can underline, you can increase or decrease the text size and the line spacing. You cannot draw freehand on the tablet the way you would be able to on a piece of paper. And so if you want to imitate or simulate the digital LSAT experience, I highly recommend using the tablet LSAT on LSAC's site. But on top of that, treat your prep books like they are a screen, like you cannot draw on them freehand. Instead, use scratch paper to the side. You will get scratch paper on test day. It'll be a booklet of 8.5 by 11 paper, unlined, approximately 14 pages. So it's not unlimited, but it is a good amount of scratch paper. And that way you'll be better simulating what it's like on test day. The other thing to be aware of is that you cannot bring your own notebook. You cannot bring your own scratch paper. That would be a huge security concern. One student was asking about that. You do get a stylus, although you don't need to use it. You can just use your finger if you want to. And in terms of difficulties, I think there are pros and cons. It's not all good or all bad. Cons, I would say, you can't draw freehand on the questions, and you can only see one question at a time. You can't see an entire passage at once or an entire game at once, just individual questions. And benefits, though, you can flag questions to come back to later, and you save time bubbling. Rather than spending time circling it, bubbling in those little ovals with the Scantron, instead, you just tap with the stylus or your finger, and you're good to go. So just to reiterate that, if someone's asking how many pages of scratch paper do you get, approximately 14 pages. LSAT has been strangely vague about this. They have not confirmed to me via email the exact number of pages, but they say approximately 12 to 14. It's more than enough. I wouldn't worry too much about it. So that's pretty much just a quick general overview. I'm happy to entertain follow-ups, of course. I got one here from Sophia asking, can we mark questions but still go back to them? Yes, you can flag a question that you've seen and come back to it later at the end of the section if you want to. With one tap of the stylus, you can go back to any individual question and any annotations you've made on that question, whether it's underlining or highlighting. Those annotations will still be there when you return to the question later. If you highlighted particular keywords or underline things, you cannot underline and highlight the same text, and you can only highlight it in one color. They will give you 3 to choose from: orange, pink, and yellow. And so I can imagine some folks developing incredibly complex annotation systems with the highlighter, the 3 highlighter colors, and the underlining tool. I wouldn't get overly involved with them. It's a little bit wonky, and I think it's just overcomplicating things. I recommend annotating very little, if at all. It takes time to annotate things, it takes time to look at them. I would just keep it simple and use your scratch paper, which you can write on with a pencil or a pen. There was some confusion around this. Can you still only bring a Ziploc bag? Yes, you could still bring a Ziploc bag. I don't know what else you might bring on top of that, but you are limited. LSAC is still very concerned about security. Although they initially were only going to allow pens, they since allowed pencils as well. You can still bring your snack, your granola bar, your juice box, your water bottle, whatever it may be. That's all still permitted. Don't spill it on the tablet, though. I don't want you to be liable for buying a new one. And if your tablet dies, if the battery dies, they have replacements available, so you don't have to worry about that as well. And the tablet, your responses sync up with a hub that the proctor has, so everything is saved every 10 seconds. So if there's technical snafus, they are able to fix things. There were some difficulties with the July administration, but I'm hoping that they'll have worked out the kinks for this fall. And of course, if anything goes terribly wrong with the fall LSATs, you do have 3 fall LSATs to choose from. So if September doesn't go well, you have October. If October doesn't go well, you have November as well. And then, of course, there's always January and beyond, but hopefully one of those 3 will knock it out for you. I have heard recently that there have not been enough test center slots available for the fall LSATs, October in particular. So if you are planning on taking the LSAT this fall and you have not yet done so, I highly recommend registering immediately. I was hearing that there were no New York City test centers available and only one in Boston. So I'm a little bit I'm unhappy to hear that. Of course, I wish they were allowing more, especially since folks who are canceling the July LSAT get a free retake in October and beyond. So anyone watching this, register ASAP, lock in a conveniently located test center.
Steve, is that because of the number of tablets that they have available, or is it just a limit on the test takers that they'll allow?
That's a great question. I'm not entirely sure. LSAC is not usually too forthcoming about the reasons for these things. So I can't really say. I know that the September deadline just passed, August 1st, I believe. So October is the next one. But I think, as always, LSAC likes to limit the number of test centers available and then open up more if and when they need them. They'd rather have too few than too many to avoid, I guess, booking too many slots that they ultimately won't need. But I think that given that October is the first time that July takers can use their free retake, there will be a lot of folks taking October. Plus, fall LSATs are popular. So I think they will open up more slots in the future, and they are responsive to criticism. If they get an overwhelming negative public response, they are sensitive to that. So if you reach out on Twitter or Facebook or email them, if enough people reach out, they will hear that and respond to that. So if you're unhappy with something, let them know, and hopefully they will open up more test centers too.
I heard some nightmare stories like you referenced about the July LSAT. Do you have I also heard from clients of ours that it went very well for particular people. So a mixed bag kind of. Do you have confidence that it's going to pull through for the fall for September?
Yeah. I think that the July LSAT, the content was not especially difficult. I think that the ambiguity around would you get paper, would you get digital, that alone was enough of a curveball that they didn't want to put any other curveballs in play there. Plus, they wanted to be able to properly compare the results of paper versus digital. They didn't want anyone to be too thrown off by the format or the ambiguity around the format that they would get. Although I did hear there were a number of technical snafus, like proctors not having enough styluses, if any, or the tablets dying, or things not syncing up properly, or the proctors just not having enough tablets for everybody when some died, which is obviously inexcusable in my opinion. There's no reason they shouldn't have enough. And obviously tablets do lose their batteries if they're untouched for a month or longer. So that should have been addressed, and there's really no excuse for that. But I'm hoping that LSAC will learn from their mistakes for the fall LSATs. And certainly I think the gap between July and September, that's what, a month and a half at least? That's more than enough time for them to work out any of those kinks. And so I'm hopeful that by September, things will be good. And certainly if you're concerned about that, go for October. And you could speak to this, Ali, as well, I'm sure. But do you think that October or November is early enough in the cycle? If someone's a little worried about September, could they just go for October or November and be okay?
Yes, absolutely. I think that those are both very safe dates. The earlier, the better, generally, as you've probably heard, as law schools operate on rolling admissions. But I think the October-November date is a very safe bet to get your application in early.
Nice. Awesome. That's good to hear. So we spent some time on my general overview on what's happening with the LSAT. So I want to turn it over to you with an update on what folks should be thinking about related to admissions and anything else you want to share.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for being here, everybody for being here. I feel like things are moving so fast in the world of LSAT and law school admissions. Things are changing so rapidly that information that you may have gotten last year or last month might not be the correct information today. And that goes for information that you search online. You have to be very careful because it gets dated quickly. So thanks for being here and finding out the real information. I just wanted to start and just give you all kind of an update on applicant and application data and how we did for this cycle and what kind of trends we're seeing there and what that might mean for applicants going forward. So those of you who are paying attention, in the 2018 cycle, there was a huge increase. It was something like an 8% increase in applicants and applications from the cycle previous. They called it the Trump bump, if you will. So basically, folks were feeling inspired, I think, to make a change, and law school seemed like a good place for that. So this year, there wasn't quite the jump, but there's still a jump. So for applicants, applicants are up 3.2% for the 2019 year. So, really the takeaway from that, I would say that applications are about flat or down about 1%, but still everything's looking kind of up. So my takeaway and my advice to applicants is just to remember that this is really still a very competitive environment. So when you move forward with your application, it's really in your best interest to do everything you can and put your best foot forward. And really put your all into your applications, including starting with your LSAT and moving on into your entire application. There's no gimmies, even if you have a fantastic LSAT score and a fantastic GPA. So I just wanted to start with that. Another thing regarding the LSAT, something that's new this year, and perhaps you've talked about this before, but the writing sample. So in June of this year, so what it used to be like as part of the LSAT, there was another section, a 35-minute section, where you had to, there was a 35-minute writing piece to the LSAT. It wasn't scored, but basically you had to choose a side and put your position forward. When I worked in admissions, the question was always, do law schools really look at that? And the answer is yes. When I worked in admissions, we really looked at it as kind of a good faith effort. We were looking for people who would put a good faith forward. But then again, at that time, it was handwritten. It was a scribble on a piece of paper. So sometimes it was really hard to tell what people were saying. So we'd look for, keywords to make sure they're giving a good effort there. Now the change is that you can do it, and stop me, Steve, if I'm getting any of these details wrong, but you can do it from a year from your LSAT administration, from your home or someplace else, from your own personal computer. And it's typed out, obviously. So you still have 35 minutes. It's still, it's still not going to be a perfect writing sample, but my guess is that law schools are going to use that information, that as a writing sample, especially in a competitive environment, especially when they might have a lot of similar applicants, similar numbers, similar feel to them. They might look at that writing sample from the LSAT and a little closer than they used to. So I don't want to over emphasize that, but I don't want to under emphasize that either. So my advice is simply that to applicants is really to know that information and to go into the writing sample knowing that it will matter. And just to have a plan, an organized way to approach that writing sample. So that's one thing about the LSAT. The other thing about the LSAT I wanted to mention, and I just really can't overemphasize this enough, is to be smart about how many times you take it. Now we have, there's so many options. You can take it. No, you cannot take it 9 times, but it's offered 9 times in a cycle. And with the new rule, you can only take it 3 times within an application cycle. But you can kind of strategize, and Steve, maybe you can stop me if I got this wrong or chime in if you agree or disagree, but you can strategize and really take it probably more than 3 times to get into school for one particular year. So you could take it perhaps April of the cycle previous, and then June, and then July, and then one of the fall administrations. So you can take it really 4 times to get your best score. But with that said, from an admissions perspective, I just really want to advise that you should really go into the LSAT planning to take it 1 time and doing everything that you can to get the best score on that first attempt, knowing that you have other opportunities and you have other chances, but not to abuse that or take that for granted. Every time you take the LSAT, you're sending a message to the law school that you're applying to, and you can explain that message. Maybe you didn't do the best the first time because you were underprepared, maybe the second time because you were sick, maybe the third time because this or that. So you can write an addendum and kind of explain that. But from the admissions perspective, if you can take it once or twice and knock it out of the park, that's always a better situation than taking it 3 or 4 times and getting this a good score then. I think you all know that law schools they report the top score. So that's in your best interest, and that's great, but they absolutely positively look at all the other scores. So just keep that in mind as you're preparing for your applications. That brings up, the LSAT brings up the LSAT versus GRE discussion. So if you don't know, some law schools will accept the GRE instead of the LSAT as the admission test to get in. This started in, I think, 2016. University of Arizona, where I used to work, was the first school, and then Harvard followed. And that wasn't that long ago. And we're up to, I think, 42 schools that now accept the GRE, with Yale being the the most recent one, I think last week or something like that. Excuse me. So this is really a trend that's not going away, it seems. So you might be asking yourself, okay, which one do I take? I would give you this advice. Well, first of all, I will have to say the lawyer answer. It depends. You're going to be hearing that from basically this point on into your career. It really does depend. But I will say that if you've already taken the LSAT, don't go out and take the GRE. The school will get that LSAT score if you've already taken it. So there's no point. I can't think of a situation where there would be a good idea to take the GRE on top of that. But then again, it does depend. All schools accept the LSAT. 40 or so accept the GRE. So if you want to have the most options, which I always think is a fabulous idea, you're still going to want to take the LSAT, I think, if you haven't chosen a test. You also kind of know where you stand with the LSAT. So you can look at the data and see that the particular school of your dreams has this as a median. You take the LSAT, you know where you fall. Now that's not true with the GRE. If you take the GRE, you don't really know where you fall. There's no median GRE number for any of the schools yet. It's so new that I don't think uniformly across the board, admission deans they're not judging this in any manner that is consistent. So it's very hard to see to know what you need to be a good candidate at that particular school. Now, some reasons that you might choose the GRE, maybe you're wonderful in math. Maybe you're applying for a joint degree. Maybe you already have taken the GRE. So those are some situations where you may want to take that. But I would certainly say the default is still the LSAT, even though that might change with time with all these schools creeping up in numbers on who accepts the GRE. Another thing that I want to mention as far as an admissions trend, and this is really a wonderful one, is it seems that more schools are offering interviews. I think that's fabulous. I'm so excited about that because we at Stratus and we at Stratus are helping applicants, and applicants are trying desperately to differentiate themselves and to humanize their application. So what better way to do that than actually talk to someone in the admissions office, talk to faculty members, talk to alumni, and have an opportunity to really put a face with everything that you've submitted on paper. So I think it's fabulous. There are about 20 schools in the top 50 right now that have interviews of some sort, and about half of the top 20 schools have interviews of some sort. So they're usually by invitation, and if you are invited, that means they like you, and they're seriously considering you. And my biggest tip would certainly be, do not turn down an invitation at a school that you want to go to for an interview. My second tip is make sure you prepare. Be prepared for everything on your application. Do mock interviews with someone. At Stratus, if you know anything about us, we have a real team approach when you work with us. And one thing we added this year was an interview specialist to your team. So somebody who will step in and do that mock interview and give you some real constructive and honest feedback to how you did. So those are the things that I wanted to chat about and give you kind of an update on law school admissions.
Thanks for that overview, Allie. Really interesting to hear about, especially the interviews. I hadn't heard too much about those. The interviews, are they primarily conducted over video, online, or in person?
Yeah, so a number of ways, mostly Skype or online. They could be in person. I haven't heard of schools really flying candidates out. I think that's kind of out of budget. But if you're in town, but they do have sometimes alumni interviews where you might have an alumni in a city that's close to you. And so you meet with them at a coffee shop. If you're located in Chicago, maybe you go to the Starbucks in Chicago and meet with them, and then they report back to the school. There's also, I've heard of the dreaded group interview, which is never fun, but they do those as well. So it's a variety. I'd say the majority would be Skype.
Right. And is there anything that applicants should be aware of in particular about a Skype interview versus an in-person one? Common mistakes?
Oh, I'm not sure there's anything different in a Skype interview versus an in-person one. I mean, you always present yourself professionally, and more than anything, just to be completely prepared to know everything that you have submitted, everything that's on your application, your resume, of course, inside and out, and everything in your personal statement. I was thinking about this actually today. Be prepared also in an interview if you take more than one LSAT. So that's something that you want to, maybe you didn't address it in an addendum. Maybe you took 3 LSATs, you didn't address it, which is okay sometimes, depending on the circumstance. But in that interview, you may very well be asked, so what happened? Why'd you take this? Well, why didn't you prepare? Those kind of questions. They're not meant to be overly tough. There's certainly schools have different questions that they ask, and we can help you figure those out. You have a data bank of school-specific questions. And also, I was going to say, know about the school that you're applying to. So know about yourself, and then also know about the school. Know about your interviewers. Yeah.
No, it's really good to think about. I could imagine that maybe some applicants wouldn't prepare as much for an online one because they're just treating it like a Skype call where they're not actually going anywhere.
Right.
Take it just as seriously.
Yeah, you have to, remove all those strange posters in your background, and
Are the video interviews, are they recorded if they're over Skype?
I don't know if all of them are. I think probably some of them are, because it's not going to be just one person that, probably the information is going to, but I don't know details on that.
Right, because I've heard there's this online platform called Kira that some schools like NYU use, and I'm wondering if maybe those are recorded.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
But either way, obviously, it's being evaluated, you're being rated, you're being scored in some way.
Absolutely. Every contact that you have is an important contact, whether it's with the admissions office, faculty, alumni, other students. I mean, you should really just assume that every connection you're making is getting right back into your application.
Sure.
Yeah.
We've gotten a question from the audience here. Someone asking, do you know if Canadian law schools work the same way?
You mean with interviews or generally?
I'm guessing the person's saying generally. We don't have a detail on that one.
I think they're roughly the same. So roughly the same way with Canadian law schools. But I can't say for certain, and I'm not sure exactly about the question, but I think roughly the application process is the same. We could certainly help you look into that if you're interested.
Yeah, I think from what I've heard, they're generally the same, but Canadian schools might weigh LSAT a little bit less heavily.
Okay.
Yeah. Obviously, America has such a heavy focus on standardized tests that any other country will weigh it less heavily in comparison.
Yeah, I would concur.
And then are there any we have another question here, any resources to see schools that use the LSAT versus the GRE, if there's a list somewhere, and in particular, dual degree programs?
Okay, so with regard to the GRE and the LSAT question, all schools use the LSAT, so there's that answer. If you go to the organization that runs the GRE, ETS, if you go on their website, they have a list of all the schools that accept the GRE. So you can see it there. If you're interested in a particular school, you can go, obviously to their webpage. They have that information as well. I would certainly feel free to call the admissions office at any school you're interested in going to and talking to the admissions officers there. And I already forgot the second part of that question. I'm sorry.
Just dual degree programs.
Yeah, dual degree programs. That is so school specific. I think you have to just go to the particular school you're interested in and call the various departments that you're interested in and see what they can see if they offer it. And from my experience, even if they haven't offered it in the past, they may create something for you with a dual degree. If you want this particular graduate degree and a law degree, they can create those for you generally. So it doesn't even have to exist necessarily at a lot of schools in order to pursue that. But that's certainly a question. It's an interesting admissions process for dual degrees too. Generally, you have to be admitted in through both schools. It's a bit clunky, to be honest with you, in my experience as to how that works. But you just know you do have to be admitted both. So you have to look at the application data and the admission requirements, both programs.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I would suspect that a given applicant is probably it's not the way to go about it is not to just take these exams and then see where you can go. It's to look at the school first and see what they require.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are so many ways to choose the school that you want, and so much information, and so much research you really have to do prior to applying that I would absolutely recommend. There's just so many things. It's really nothing to go into lightly. Take the test, see what happens. Certainly nothing to go into lightly. This is your future you're talking about, so it's definitely worth it to invest the time in the front end in order to get the best result for your career.
Yeah, definitely. I did want to share some quick thoughts on the question of how many times to take the LSAT given the retake limits. And
Absolutely.
I agreed with your comments earlier. I think that you do want to take it seriously. You do want to take it when you're ready. There are ways you could circumvent the retake limits somewhat, because it is 3 times in one cycle. So you could take it in April before the new cycle begins,
Right.
as a way to squeeze in one more. But as always, only take it when you feel ready and you feel you have a good shot of getting the best score possible. So if you are super prepared far in advance, you could start preparing in, let's say, December or January, take it in April for the following cycle. Then you have the chance to retake in June or July or the fall and potentially do even better. And I would recommend taking it more than once on average. For the average person, I think should take it more than once, because just through luck alone, you could do a few points better. There's a margin of error or a score band of 3.5 points on each end. And because schools are only required to submit the highest score, although they do look at all scores, you could just do a few points better and apply with that higher score. And if you don't, no big deal. And given that the LSAT is offered 9-10 times a year going forward, especially for a case like this fall where you have 3 exams in 3 consecutive months, if you're taking September, why not take October or November as well? You've only got to stay fresh on the LSAT for another month or 2, which is just 4 to 8 weeks more. Do a timed exam a week for 4 weeks, take it again, maybe do better, maybe not. If you do better, amazing. If not, not a huge deal. But of course, take it having a reason for doing so and putting in the time.
Be prepared to explain that.
Yeah, be prepared to explain
an interview, maybe an addendum. I would agree with you. And, a note on 1 or 2 points, 2 or 3 points on the LSAT. We get that question a lot, like, oh, should I retake it? What is enough of an increase to make it worth my while to retake it? That's a tough question because it really depends. It depends on the school you're applying to a large degree, because if you are right below their median. Median is such a big deal to law schools, a lot of law schools, I should say. If you are right below their median, you may or may not get admitted. It's tougher, and you're not getting any scholarship money probably. Now, if you creep that up 2 points, you are above their median. Maybe you're even at their 75th. You're getting scholarship money, and you are probably getting in if you also have the softs, the personal statement and the essays and the letters of recommendations and the GPA and all those other stuff. But the LSAT it weighs the most. So yeah, those 2 or 3 points could really make a difference depending on the school that you're trying for.
So the medians, of course, it's they're taking the LSAT score, they're taking the GPA, they're inputting it into the unique admissions index. So there's a calculation going on. But is there also something psychological about, let's say, a 169 versus a 170 or a 159 versus a 160? Does that have any weight?
You mean just by the numbers themselves, putting apart what the median is, putting that
Yeah,
aside?
just the numbers themselves in terms of like getting into that next level.
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I think it really is. If there's anything, it's about the median for sure. It's about the 25th and it's about the 75th. And and even let's say that you're going for a particular school that has a 165 median. The hard part is, hey, you hit that 165, you take the LSAT, you're good to go. But what if their internal guidance is to creep that median up to a 166? You don't know that. You don't know that until the next year. So, you still might not be hitting your the median. So it really is, it's really tricky because, that 165 versus 166, does that really make, with everything else the same, does that really make that candidate a far superior law student when they get admitted? Absolutely, positively not. But it does make a difference in the world of admissions.
Yeah, and that's why retaking, you get a few points more, even just through luck alone.
Yeah.
Randomness makes a big difference in the end, just because of what the schools need on their end. It's
Absolutely.
nothing personal to you.
Absolutely.
All right, so we got a few questions here, Ali, on letters of recommendation.
Sure.
Who to ask, how many do you need, and what if you haven't kept in touch with your professors?
Okay. You're going to have to remind me again. Okay.
Sure.
So I'll start with the second one, which was how many do you need? School specific. So typically speaking, 2 or 3, but make sure to look at the requirements of the school. Some schools will say 4 is okay. I've never seen any school that said fewer than 2. So you just have to look at the requirements and follow what they say. The first part of that question was, who do you get them from?
Who to ask, yeah.
Okay, who do you ask? The most important, the most valuable letters of recommendation are academic, by far. Now that's tricky if you've been out of school and you haven't stayed connected with your professors. So it's tricky, but I'm going to tell you that those are the best, because you have faculty members sitting on the admission committee who they speak the same language as professors from your undergraduate. So they hear that, they like that, and they understand it when they see a letter that says, I have taught thousands of students and Steve is among the top 10% of students I have ever taught. That means something, and that means something concrete to a faculty member who's sitting on the admissions committee. So close second, if you can't get those academics. Let me just tell you about, on the academic letter of recommendation, we get this question a lot. Does it matter if it's, a top professor? Can it be the teaching assistant in my class? Who's the best person? The best person is the person who knows you, who's worked with you, you've done substantial work for, who actually can say something meaningful about who you are. So the title is not nearly as important as the relationship you've had with that academic reference. Professional letters are also very good, and especially for people who've been out of school for a bit. And the key with those, I would say, is to have them be strategic about what they write in them. And you have kind of limited control over that, but you can certainly give them some suggestions as to what they might talk about in the letter. And you want them to talk about the kind of skills that you actually need to be a good law student. So your analytical skills, your research skills, those kind of things. I would say that letters of recommendation are incredibly important. And people probably don't realize how important they are, but they can really, an average one, or I've seen some bad ones, they can really hurt an applicant very much. And the third question was, I don't remember.
If you haven't kept in touch with them for a while.
Right. So if you have someone in mind you haven't kept in touch with for a while, you need a little bit of time to reacquaint yourself with them. So I would suggest starting that communication back up, let them know who you are. Maybe, certainly I would say over time, but maybe in the beginning you can remind them of who you are by sending your resume, remind them of the class that you had with them, remind them of, start the communication early and work your way up. Into full on, then getting the letter from them. Make sure, probably the biggest thing is make sure they can write you a stellar letter of recommendation. Ask them straight out, can you write me a great letter of recommendation? And if they hesitate, if they say no, which they might, or they might say, well, I don't know you that well, but I can certainly say that you showed up to class and you got an A. That's not the letter that you want. I would go somewhere else.
Nice. Yes. So have a few people in mind, have more in mind than you think you'll need.
I think that is wise advice. Yes.
Great. Thanks for that. Thanks for that rundown. So let's see. I've got one here. When to take the LSAT for the first time and how someone with critical thinking skills might do. So the first time to take the LSAT, again, it's when you think that you'll be ready, but as always, start the process early. If taking the LSAT in the spring or summer before you plan to apply is a good idea, so that you have time to retake it if you need to, or if you want to, if you might do a few points better. Scores are valid for 5 years. So it's not a bad idea to start the process earlier than you think you'll need. You do have a good runway on that, but put in the time. I think that 3 months is not really enough time to reach your fullest potential, even though most people want to devote nothing more than 2 to 3 months. It really does take typically 5 to 6 months to reach your fullest potential. The LSAT is much harder than any other standardized exam you've taken up to this point. It'll be tougher than you expected, and so it's good to have the extra time, especially if you're out of school and you're working or you have family obligations. Those things can be a big drain on your time, and so it might require slowing down a bit and spreading it over a longer period. Then with regard to critical thinking is huge when it comes to the LSAT. It's, logical reasoning is half the exam, and that's really nothing but critical thinking. And then critical thinking is involved in the other sections too. So I think an underlying question here is, let's say if you've taken a logic class in college, or should you take a logic class in college? I think that a logic class does overlap somewhat, but not that much with the LSAT. So if you think you'll do well in the logic class and it won't hurt your GPA and you're excited about it anyway, then great, do it by all means, but don't take it just for the purposes of LSAT prep. It could hurt your GPA, and it goes far beyond what you need for the LSAT itself. Most of the LSAT is informal logic, not formal. The diagramming style they use in logic classes is far more complicated than what you need for the LSAT and may just end up confusing you. So I wouldn't do it just for that reason alone. So I hope that addresses the question, but feel free to ask follow-ups on that. So we got plenty of great questions here in the chat here. Let's see. Someone's asking about being an older applicant. So, but they're saying they're 27 or 28, which is not that old. It does feel old, right? How would being, I guess, out of school for a few years affect your admissions chances? Should you wait even longer to beef up your resume or get a promotion first?
First of all, the word that came to mind was fabulous. Fabulous to get some experience after undergrad before you head into law school. I think this has changed over the years, but law schools prefer applicants that have experience. That's not to say that the applicant who goes straight through doesn't have a shot at all. Of course, that's not true. But they love students that are out of school a bit and that have experience, real life experience. Schools want students who are mature, who have thought through what they want to do. Schools are going to commit a great deal of resources to you, and they want you to actually be a lawyer at the end of the day coming out of law school. So they want you to be sure about that decision and not go into it cavalierly. And those people who have been out a year or 2 or 3 have hopefully had a chance to really think about what they want their future to look like. They just come, I think admissions committees really look upon that favorably. Also because students who've been out of school can and bring a real world perspective to the classroom. There's a lot of talk about diversity, and that's certainly something that schools look for, and students who can come with diverse perspectives into the classroom. And when you've been out a bit, you typically have that. So I don't know the answer to the second part, whether or not you should stay out even longer to get more experience. I think it kind of depends on what your experience is. You don't have to stay out for 10 years and then go to law school. Although if you do that, that's okay too. There are a lot of, second careers into law that are fine and that are great if it makes sense for that particular candidate. So it depends. It depends on that candidate. And what they've done with that time. But I think especially at the more elite schools, I think you see that the majority of their admitted students do come with a bit of experience. They didn't go straight through from their undergrad.
Thanks for that. Now we got a follow up from Sonia asking, how do you highlight these unique characteristics if you're a mature student, if you've been out for a while? How do you highlight your unique perspective, and is an addendum warranted in this situation?
So you can highlight it in a number of ways. Your whole application is really it's going to be a full picture of who you are. So there's no one place in particular to highlight it. And my guess is that it will shine through in every piece of your application because of your experience. So the most obvious places I would think would be your resume, your resume that will list your experience. So that will kind of show what you've done with your time. Your essays, your personal statement, maybe your diversity statement, kind of depending on what you choose to write about, if you choose to include a diversity statement. But maybe you want to talk about the unique perspective you bring because of that experience, and maybe you want to write an essay about it. So it's very school specific as to essay prompts, what they want specifically from you. But if that's an important piece of who you are and what you're bringing to law school, there's a way to get it into the application.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Resume, personal statement. You could talk about it anywhere, bring it up anywhere.
Anywhere. Yep.
All right. We got plenty of questions here. I want to make sure we get to all of them. Let's see. What's the most important factor in an application, and do they really look at applications holistically?
I'll answer the second part first. Yes. I truly believe that they look at applications holistically. I know that they do. We always did. All of my colleagues in the admissions world always did. I'm sure perhaps there is, I don't know, maybe there's a school out there that doesn't care, only cares about money perhaps, that doesn't care. But I think the overall answer is absolutely they look at applicants holistically. I think the first part of the question was, what's the most important?
Most important part of the application.
The most important part of the application is that it in its entirety reflects an authentic portrayal of who you are. There are several pieces. You really have to spend the time at the beginning to strategize about what each piece of your application will say about you, and hopefully at the end of the day, all 5 or 6 pieces will present a picture of you in your wholeness, which is a big order because you're a person with a lot of attributes. So all the positive characteristics, at least in that application. But you do have to be authentic, absolutely, positively, 100%. You have to be you. Don't be swayed by what you think schools are looking for. That never works. Now, back to interviews. If you write an application that is not in your voice, is not authentic, is not really who you are. And then, hooray, you get called for an interview. You're all of a sudden talking to someone and they're going to ask about, what you and everything on your application, you're going to come across as not the same person. So it's just incredibly important to be authentic. And that's mostly to do with your soft components. Of course, you have the numbers that I guess they portray the authentic you too, in a way.
That makes a lot of sense, because you can't fake it, because there are more and more schools doing interviews.
Yes.
There are the recommendation letters as well.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
And then you also, as you mentioned earlier, there's the writing sample now. The
Yes.
writing sample, which is
Yes.
digital, and they're monitoring you with a webcam and a microphone, and you're doing it at home. It's
Yes.
filtered, it's typed. They're more likely to look at it. So
Yes.
you can't fake it
Right.
the same as you might have been able to.
No. And I just a kind of a rah moment for a second. Just know that you are enough the way that you
Yes.
are. There's no specific person you have to be a law student and a lawyer. It's you. You're the type of person that you have to be. So I'm always amazed. And one of my favorite things about my job is when someone comes across and says, "Oh, I'm not that special. I haven't done much. I've been, say, a teacher for, 20 years or 10 years or whatever the situation." And I start to talk to them about what they did as a teacher. I'm sorry, I find that amazing what you did with that group of first graders for the last 10 years. You managed them how, and you organized them how, and you created all these new programs for this crazy group of children how. And, we talk about how we can use that to to show that they have the tools and the skills to be a great law student. And I'm always amazed how unspecial people think they are, but they really are. That's my rah moment for all of you out there.
Nice. I can certainly see that. Yeah, definitely.
It's my pleasure to help people discover that. That's the part I like most about my job.
No, that's got to be really cool. A cool part of your work.
Definitely.
Nice. So we got one really nuanced question on LSAT reading comprehension. So I want to make sure we address that.
Awesome.
Then we'll get back to more admission stuff. So we've got someone asking, for the reading comp section, would I recommend giving a brief 1 or 2 word summary of the point of a section of a passage? So like viewpoints and evidence and such, so we know where to reference when going back to the questions. I think reading comprehension is more personal than any other section of the LSAT. So it requires trying things out and seeing, do they work for you? You've got enough time before the fall LSATs, even the September one is more than a month away, to try it out on 5 sections or 10 sections, or even just 5 or 10 passages, and see, is this helping you articulate or extract a main idea or primary purpose from the passage? Obviously, you're doing this on scratch paper to the side if you're doing the digital LSAT, not on the passage text itself. But I do think pulling away just a key word or key phrase is really enough, and you don't need to write down more than that because it takes a lot of time. So now we've got more admissions questions here. If you're planning on taking a gap year or 2 before applying to law school to boost up your application, to amp it up, what kind of outside experience would benefit applicants?
It depends. Sorry, that's my standard answer. I'm sticking to it. It really depends on what your interests are, where your interests lie. It depends if you are interested in, if you're interested in being a litigator, maybe you go work for a litigation law firm. Maybe you're an intern type job somewhere. Maybe you get some actual in-office experience or in the courtroom experience doing that. That really demonstrates that you're passionate about moving forward, into law school with this kind of background. Just to go with my statement before, just make sure it fits you and your interests. I think that would be my advice. There's no right or wrong answer. There's no specific experience you have to get into law school, but just something that demonstrates your passion to go to law school is pretty helpful.
Thanks for that. We got another one here. if a recommender who has a JD, does that matter? Does that help at all? Are letters of recommendation from JDs weighed more heavily? And then there's something related. In this case, the person who has a JD works in student affairs at the university. Is that academic or is it professional? I guess more depends on
tiered questions.
Yeah, lots of complicated questions. Let's just narrow it and say, does having a JD as a recommender help in any
way? Only if they are writing the letter in their capacity as an attorney who has worked with you. For example, if you were an intern or something like that and worked with this particular JD, and they can talk about the work that you did for them and how they may have some specialized knowledge as to what a law student or a lawyer might need to be successful. However, beyond that, I would say no. No, it doesn't give any special weight unless, and again, it depends, unless, did that particular JD go to the school that you are applying to? Do they really have specialized knowledge about what it takes to be successful in that particular program? Because that might give a special help if they know the applicant well and have worked with them in some capacity and can speak to what that school in particular might be interested in. I'm not sure just a JD from anywhere would be helpful or particularly helpful.
But letters from alums of the law school could get a little extra boost, maybe.
Maybe. And most importantly, if they know the applicant well and can speak to their skills. There's nothing particularly magical about that. But if they are an alum, they do presumably know, and hopefully they did well in school, So there's a lot of kind of factors there. The admission committee might have had this person as a student. Maybe they didn't do so hot, and maybe they're going to look at it and say, oh, I remember that guy, and I'm not going to take his advice. So just be careful with that. Yeah.
But I would imagine that the best letters are from someone who's knows you well and has evaluated you in a professional capacity, has supervised you in some way.
Absolutely.
That trumps everything.
Absolutely. Yes. JD or not. Yeah.
Right. Okay. We got one more here from Felipe asking, what are the chances for a foreign attorney who has an LLM to apply for a JD in the US? Does having an LLM or a foreign law degree help in any way?
Yeah, so interesting question. There are a number of programs nowadays who have JD advanced standing degrees, and I don't know how familiar everybody is with those, but basically if you have a foreign law degree, you can get a year of credit toward a US JD degree, which is a very interesting. Not all the schools have them, maybe like I want to say 30 or so. Once again, University of Arizona was the first one that kind of pioneered that, I believe. So it's an interesting program. You do get credit for your foreign law degree, a year of it, up to a year of it. So that's an option. I am working with someone actually right now who is who will have a foreign law degree who is just applying for JD. And I think that there's a lot of pluses there. I think that there's a lot of experience that particular person has in bringing that education with them. I also think that there has to be a recognition somewhere in the application that the two degrees are very different, and the why a US JD is desired will be a very important piece to that. Does that answer the question?
I think it does. It does. The person can feel free to ask a follow-up if they like. One more here from Luz Maria asking, how can I improve on assumption questions for the LSAT? So first off, assumption questions, I'm not going to go into too much depth here, but there are two types of assumption questions, necessary assumption and sufficient assumption on the logical reasoning section of the LSAT. They're asking for very different things. Necessary assumption questions are asking for something that needs to be true in order for the argument to work. Sufficient assumption questions are asking for new information that, if true, will guarantee the argument 100%. How do you improve? I've got articles on my site and lessons in my courses that go into detail on the various strategies for each. I would recommend doing several of each type by type to drill your recognition of which type of assumption question you're dealing with, and then the strategies to address it. So for example, necessary assumption questions, negating each choice and seeing which one, when negated, will destroy the argument is a good way to get better at those. For sufficient assumption questions, there are a variety of formulas or formats those stimuli involve, stimulus being the question, the short paragraph. And if you can get used to recognizing which formula is underlying a particular question, then you'll start to unravel or unmask the complexity of that question and be in a better position to solve it. I have categorizations of questions on my site, so you can identify them in your books of LSAT exams, and email me and I'll send you a link to that. But yeah, like anything else, any question type, it involves drilling that question by type and learning to better apply the strategies. So if you have time, Allie, let's knock out one more and then we'll call it a wrap for tonight.
Absolutely.
It's been great questions though.
Absolutely.
We've got one from Josh asking, what would you recommend to someone planning to get their JD, but not necessarily planning to be an attorney or a lawyer? How should they talk about this, if at all, on their application?
That's a great question. I think that you have to be honest with your, I think you have to be honest in why you're going to law school. I think you have to be honest throughout your whole entire application. That's really important. Once again, going back to the authenticity kind of piece to it. So it depends, sorry, how many times, it depends on what you want to do. What are you planning to do with that law degree? Why do you need that law degree? Why do you need that law degree from that particular school? How is that going to help you get where you want to be someday? So whether or not you mention it really kind of depends on the answers to those questions. And just to be, I think the whole thing is you really just have to be honest throughout the whole thing. And not think too much about what they want to hear, but you do need to make sure it's a good fit. So if there's a reason that you don't want to disclose that, I mean, you must have a good reason is what I'm thinking. You must have a good plan in mind if you really don't want to practice law, but you're going to devote 3 years to a lot of studying and a lot of hard work and some hard times and some wonderful times. But you must have a plan in mind. So I'm curious as to what that is, and I'm sure the school would be curious as to what that is. They definitely want to devote their time and resources to someone who's going to do something great with it at the other end. I'm sure you have that in mind, and they're going to want to know more about that probably. Whether or not you include that, it depends.
And on the flip side of that one, just sort of a follow-up here, if someone does know why they want to go to law school and they have a particular practice area in mind, should they mention that?
Yeah, and this one is the flip side and also pertains to the other question as well, because, I don't know that first question. I'm not sure how sure they are as to what they want to do with their law degree, but know that admission committees, faculty members, lawyers know that what you think on, today, fast forward 4 years when you're starting your practice, it's probably going to be a little different. It might not be. You certainly might be the exception. And if you have a lot of background, maybe your professional experience, your personal background that leads to doing a particular type of practice, or, it may not change, but it may very well change from what you want to do today. So if you think for sure what you want to do, yeah, I think you should mention that. Don't write your entire personal statement on what you're going to do as a international lawyer, immigration lawyer, entertainment lawyer, whatever you want to say, because just keep in the back of your mind that may change over time. So you don't want to devote, your entire essay to that topic. But if you have some real reason and some background in that particular area, you certainly want to mention that. That just shows your passion, kind of your why, what led you here? Why law? Why this school? Those are really the key things that you need to answer in your application.
And that's showing that you really have evidence for what you want to do. That it's not just a dream.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's become more and more important in admissions, is kind of having that evidence and that passion, and just being able to concretely answer that why question.
Love it. Great.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a pleasure, Allie.
It has been my pleasure too.
Once again.
Absolutely. And such terrific questions from the audience. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for joining. This was great. I'm glad we were able to collaborate again.
Absolutely.
What's the best way for folks to get in touch with you if they're interested in potentially working with you?
Yeah, so to find our website, go to stratusadmissionscounseling.com. That's where you can find our company. And you can email info@stratusadmissions.com to get more information about setting up a free 30-minute consultation with me or one of our other counselors. So yeah, we would love to hear from everyone. We're very happy to be stepping into this new cycle, and very excited to work with aspiring law students.
Great. Thanks so much for that, Allie. I put the links in the chat here for the
Terrific.
website and the email. And I definitely encourage folks to check you out and take advantage of the free consultation. Folks can reach me, as always, lsatunplugged@gmail.com. I've got the website, the LSAT blog. I've also got the YouTube channel and the podcast, LSAT Unplugged. Feel free to check them out and subscribe. And of course, feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your LSAT prep. I'm happy to help however I can. All right, thanks folks for joining once again, and please be in touch.